Hello and Aloha Pa, the Baha'i greeting. My name is Abbas Tamori. Time is 10:43. Today is June 24th on Friday night. As I promised, I'm going to reiterate what I have said in the past from 2015 in a scientific way using the Baha'i text. In other words, as one of the principles of the Baha'i faith, religion has to be according to science and logic. So I'm trying to bring that science and logic into explaining, to begin with, the philosophy of the faith. And I'm dedicating this to the people of China, especially the member of CCP, because religion has been totally a rotten ideology of sort for them that they just cannot understand any of it. They don't want to. So, hoping that this make some sense and create some way to look at these issues in a scientific way. Going to the topic, you've heard on radios, TVs, internet, and books, a whole lot of people, they talk about origin of universe and using the laws of physics, especially today quantum mechanics, the nuclear physics, the physics inside the atoms, and try to explain how the universe as we know it has begun. But if you pay attention, you'll see this universe that these scientists are talking about is after the Big Bang. There are many theories, few anyways, famous one about the beginning of the universe. The most famous one, I think, is the Big Bang theory, that the beginning of the universe starts from the small little things, and then it exploded and created this universe that we have. So the main point in what they are saying is that this is not really the creation, the origin of existence. It's really origin of time and motion. A matter at the Big Bang starts to move, and then the time kicks in and the motion kicks in, and science, physics can explain things. But if you tell them there was a time, there must have been a time that there was no time and no motion, they cannot deny that there is an existence, but they just let that in the hand of the philosophers. Physics cannot go in there. In 18th century, mid-18th century, two main theory really started on this. Apparently opposite, but when you look at it, in a way, they're not really opposites. It's just one is complete, the other one is incomplete, you know. One was in Iran around 1844, which is the beginning of the Baha'i faith. And the other one was in Europe around the same time when Karl Marx starts the scientific philosophy of materialism, which borrowed from Hegel's, Friedrich Wilhelm Hegel's. There he touches some of the things that scientists, they don't want to touch, with some explanation. He says, although we don't know what the beginning of the universe really, based on the laws of the physics and observations, is, it says, but it at least has to have two components. opposite and complementary to each other. He calls them theses and antitheses. From the interaction of theses with antitheses, a synthesis comes. In an ordinary language, it's like a mother and a father. Then they have a child out of the interaction. Like a nucleus, like an atom, which really is a proton, positively charged, and electron negatively charged, create the structure of atom, such as in hydrogen. So he says there has to be these two. But he points to something else that's interesting. He says that for any reaction to take place, anything, in this material life, in this existence, there has to be an outside condition, a catalyst, without which you cannot do this. Mao Zedong says if you want to have a chicken, you have to have an egg, fertilized, with these forces inside it. But it does require a 37-degree temperature. If that is not there, the egg will not develop in the chicken. So Karl Marx defines matter or existence as something that consists of a thesis, antithesis, causing the synthesis with an outside condition. Then he says basically that for something to be, it has to be in time, it has to have motion of any sort, and it has to occupy an empty space. He does not define what empty space is. To him, it's nothing. He says that empty space, that nothing, has to be there for the matter to be placed in. But if you tell him that it must have something to do, he says no, nothing is nothing. Because it is nothing, it cannot do anything with the things. It's a part of existence. The part that is meaningless. The only meaning it has is just place the matter in it. That's it. And then he says to the theologists, religious people, is your God moves? You say no. Is it in time? No. Does it occupy empty space like hydrogen, oxygen? We say no. He says, well, that's a definition of nothing. Yes, nothing exists with those definitions, but it can't do anything with the things. It's just an outside condition. It's got to be there, and it is there, but it has nothing to do with the process. Today, the people in the nuclear physics, quantum mechanics, they say void or emptiness does not exist. They say it doesn't. And they say out of nothing, the void, these particles just springs right out. And it does. Sometimes also, the two particles, like an electron and positron. Positron means a positively charged electron, as opposed to the negatively charged electron. That basically means positive, negative means they go against. One is clockwise, the other one is anti-clockwise. When they collide, they both get disappeared, a process called annihilation. Well, physicists couldn't believe this, that matter becomes nothing. They worked on it. And they proposed there must be a different field besides electron field that we know. which has other particles field, that these guys, they go in there. And they call that Higgs, after the scientist named Higgs. It was 1912, I think, at CERN in Europe. Finally, they discovered this field called the Higgs field, where the two electrons, they do not annihilate, positron and electron, they form a boson called Higgs, a boson that has mass. This is a different type of boson. Boson usually does not have mass, but this one has. It's very massive, in fact. And the same way, this boson in the field of the Higgs field can degenerate into two electrons that we just see. So these fields that they are bringing it up in their quantum mechanics, it tells us that it's like different levels of existence. Like we have animal levels, human level, material level. Within the quantum mechanics, there is a atomic level, but then it goes further down. It's like a pages in a book. This page was not read, and they opened that page and it was Higgs field. They say electron or particles are not really anything visible. Imagine just a plain page of a paper with bumps in it. Those bumps are electrons or particles. So they said there is no void, really. Void does not exist. Even in the void there is material of some form. I say no. In the beginning of the universe, according to them, today physics, it's something like a sextillion or octillion, meaning 26. One with 26 zero or octillion 27 zero minus is smaller than the nucleus of an atom. Imagine that. The universe, they say, was that small. That's incredible. But this is their conjecture. In that, if this existence is as big as it is right now, if you crunch it to such a small size, you cannot crunch nothingness with it. So very important. Because nothing cannot crunch. It's nothing. It cannot get bigger or smaller. It does not react. It's literally nothing. You cannot make it a smaller or bigger. Void is different. This absolute void of the material void is different from a space. A space is the emptiness around an object in the space that it gets warped. It's like an aura, let's say, a person has. And according to Einstein, it warps the space. That's why the object revolves around the bigger object in the space. So a space is different from void. And the void does nothing. So there is an absolute void, materially void, in the beginning of the universe, when the entire universe is as small as that. In the same manner, I believe that if we traveled a billion years from now, I don't know, they say this world is expanding. Sure, it started 15 billion years ago, expanded from one point and is expanding. So this expansion has a border, must have, from where it's just going. So if you get there, beyond that is nothing. And if there's nothing, you could, as an astronaut, throw your hat in there. Where's the hat going? Into nothing. See, nothing is very strange. We as a human being, we can make things. We cannot make nothing. We can remove things, so we get the nothing. but we cannot create it. We cannot expand it. We don't know what it is. It's nothing. Anything we do is something. It cannot be nothing. Us, universe, anybody in this world cannot create nothing. So, I studied this with Karl Marx. I was, a person with a belief of Islamic belief those days in Iran. And I was in love with a Christian girl. I couldn't get her, she couldn't get me. I went and studied religion and found that these are all BS. I prefer the book of Dostoevsky, and later on definitely Karl Marx, and even the works of Mao. So it makes sense. These are children's stories. So, but I was astounded with this point, with these 3 points that Karl Marx says. To be, you have to have movement, you have to be in time, you have to occupy an empty space, and God doesn't do, therefore God is nothing. How do we do this? It took a long time. I think I was in Cornwall, Ontario, 35 years ago. 30 years ago, around 1990. There was a gay boy, I didn't know what gay is those days, his name was Christian Gosselin. He asked questions, I went to answer him, and he was keep saying, what about that beginning of the matter, this and that? Suddenly, just like Archimedes, I said, Eureka, I think I found an answer. He was explaining to me, what is it, what did you find? And I told him, I'll explain it to you. Let me digest it first. I found out the definition of Karl Marx about existence is incomplete. That's why he came to this conclusion that there is no God. I add a 4th dimension to his explanation. I said, sure, matter is in moving, it's in time, it occupies empty space, but it's always composed. There is no such a thing as pure matter. But if matter is composed, as he says, theses and antitheses, that can be the beginning of a universe. That can be universe, yes, but that cannot be the beginning of existence. Because immediately as my mind I said, where did 2 come from? It has to come from one place. But beyond that 2, then I have to assume something that's pure. If it is pure, then it's one thing. It cannot cause this universe. Because I believe Marx, there has to be a thesis and antithesis. So prior to these 2, whatever is left beyond this is either thesis or antithesis, whatever you call it, it requires something else to pair up with, to create the first combinations. But there's nothing else in the universe except that little things. That's basically the entire universe is crunched into that point. There's nothing else outside. If you say there is something, then I'll tell you that's not crunch, because in the beginning of the crunch, we're saying that there was no matter. Everything starts from that point, so there can't be any Higgs particles or anything else around. So, there is no other way, except we have to say, in the nothing, there is something. Obviously, it's not material, but there has to be, mathematically, logically, to be there, to work as a company with these things, which is prime matter, together to create the first combinations. You see? Then all of a sudden things changed. Now nothing has meaning. But this raises more questions. Now we have matter in the beginning. Then we have non-matter, which we kind of see it is dark, there's nothing in it. The second question is that who has made nothing? Where did nothing comes from? It has to come from something. So we have to think again that these two must have come from somewhere. And that somewhere is beyond being and nothing. Because this is the being, matter, and outside is nothing. But I have to assume some other stage, bigger than both of these, beyond these two. This is where imagination even stalls. Comprehension cannot get there. It is impossible. Yet mathematically it's correct. It sounded to me that universe is like a white letter X light. That two beam of yellow and blue comes out of it, and they cross each other and they create green, which is this universe. This does not have time, anything. Universe is always like this. This is the only way that's possible to imagine or to guess or explain the universe. This is not evolved. Evolution ends beyond the Big Bang, which is material, because there's no physics, there's no time. There's nothing that we can say things evolved. So, there are a few things here right now that are in the Baha'i faith about this, and I'm going to bring some of it. As I told you, Karl Marx bring this universe to us, a new one, that uprooted all the religious words, by talking about matter consists of a thesis, existence consists of thesis and antithesis, and something calls it outside condition. These three things, in a way, was explained by Baha'u'llah too. What about around the same time in Iran? So Baha'i faith is not any religion like you know. This is different. And believe me, it's not philosophy. I explain in detail what it is. Abdul-Baha explains, the son of Baha'u'llah, in a book called Some Answered Questions. There was an old man that in the Ottoman Empire was a prisoner, banished. American, they invited him to go to US because Ataturk came and got rid of the Ottoman Empire, and the Baha'is were freed, including him. And it was an amazing things happened in America. So one of these foreigners, it's not Iranians, started asking these questions on a lunch, and Abdul-Baha, the translator. And this is where he talks about all these things in this book. I bring some experts from you, excerpts. This is what he says about this nothingness. He says, apart from this, absolute non-existence lacks the capacity to attain existence. If the universe were pure nothingness, existence could have not been realized. So, while we believe in that nothingness, we do not believe it is nothing. Nothing materially. There's something else in it, which does not matter. Okay. And about these three things, the universe of Baha'u'llah has a material phase and an spiritual phase, and an essential phase. Three of them. I'm quoting the Book of Certitude, one of the books of Baha'u'llah. He wrote down again, I guess in 2 nights, that's it. This is an excerpt from it. Quote, "To every discerning and illumined heart, it is evident that God, the unknowable essence, the divine being, is immensely exalted beyond every human attributes, such as corporeal existence, ascent and descent, egress and regress. Far be it from his glory that human tongue should adequately recount his praise, or that human heart comprehend his fathomless mystery. He is and had been ever been veiled in the ancient eternity of his essence, and will remain in his reality everlastingly hidden from the sight of man." Right there, he's talking about the creator of that nothingness. This is the essential, beyond being and nothing. That's how he defines it. It's God, the realm of God. Then he explained, quote, "No tie of direct intercourse can possibly bind him to his creatures. He is standard exalted beyond and above all separation and union, all proximities and remoteness. No sign can indicate his presence or his absence. Inasmuch as by a word of his command, all that are in the heaven and on the earth have come to exist." This word means the nothingness now. Come from God down and the rest stages, the word of nothingness. He calls it the word as Christians do. Continues, and I quote, "And by his wish, which is the primal will itself." He calls that realm of the nothingness the realm of the prime will. So there's a prime will that teams up with prime matter in order to get the existence as we have. I quote again, "Inasmuch as by a word of his command all that are in heaven and on earth have come to exist, and by his wish, which is the primal will itself, all have stepped out of utter nothingness into the realm of being, the world of the visible." Now this is the challenge here. How are you going? Because he says there's no tie of direct intercourse. It's not like an electron from nothingness controlling the things here. There's nothing. There's no direct ties, he says. How would that thing, which is called nothing, yet we're imagining something else beyond that. Let's forget beyond, let's just go to nothing, we are in it. Karl Marx wants to know, how would you tie the universe, the existence into that? I just did. By telling you that, Mr. Marx, your universe starts from number 2. If we go one stage further, it becomes pure. Pure needs something else to team up with. Since there's no other matter, we have to assume there is something non-matter, metaphysical. That is what the nothing is. But it's still obscure. It's a big conjecture. It's a big supposition. Big assumption. Even if there is, since there's nothing, we wouldn't know it anyways. We can't feel it. How can we talk about something that does not exist? We're talking about nothing after all. So people today, especially now, materialists, they want to get an answer that's a little bit deeper, like it's more clarified. They're going to tell us if the world is made out of that nothing, and think, where is that nothing right now here? Why can't we see it? Or the effect of it. Don't tell me the effect of it is that the Higgs field and that, because they're all phase of material. Marx does not, materialism does not deny love or compassion or strange forms, But they say all of this comes from matter. This is the matter that just blooms into million strange things, a strange form, in the form of motion, fear, love, all kind of things. They all come from matter, not from anywhere else. If it is, you have to show it. So far, I brought you that Abdul-Baha says there's no nothing. It's an absolute nothing, it's agnostic. And Baha'u'llah also says there are just three stages, just like thesis and antithesis and synthesis. Here Baha'u'llah says these three stages of material, spiritual, or metaphysical. Then it says essential. There are these three. Now, the other very important thing is that in the Baha'i faith, the Baha'i philosophy of Baha'u'llah, there is no beginning for the existence. There's no end for it. So all this beginning and end we're looking for is the beginning of time and motion, not the beginning of existence. As this late fellow, my favorite physicist, was saying, the guy with the Lou Gehrig disease, Stephen Hawking. He says it doesn't matter. Before the Big Bang, matter could have been trillion years or a second before. It's irrelevant because we cannot measure it anyways. It's irrelevant, he says that. Baha'u'llah says that does not exist, there's no beginning. This is his words. He says, in the beginning that has no beginning, and in the end that has no end. He said there is a beginning, like Big Bang, and an end, Big Crunch. But that's not real beginning. It's just a phase of universe, cycles and goes, recycles itself and come back again and again. But there's no origin to this. It everlastingly has been like this. Matter keeps recycling, coming back. Universe. Just like the suns, the stars, they die, supernova, create nebula, then new suns, recycles out of that, it comes back and it keeps going. This is the word of Abdul-Baha in this regard also in the book Some Answered Questions. I quote, "Thus as the essence of oneness or divine being is eternal and everlasting," here it means, as I said, is nothing and beyond nothing. There's the word everlasting because why is it not everlasting? Because it's not a matter, so it will be everlasting. There's nothing after all. It says, "Thus as the essence of oneness of divine being is eternal and everlasting, that is, as it has neither beginning nor end, it follows that the world of existence, this endless universe, likewise has no beginning." Look, a painting on the wall. If we want to say, date this painting, when this painting was made, you have to know when the painter was living. Since we don't know when the painter was living, at least we cannot determine because it's coming out of that nothingness or beyond that, how could we know when these things was there? There's no time for it. Baha'i faith in fact says there is no creation. That things in the beginning, prime matter, prime will, it's not created. Creation takes time, it's an action. Abdullah says these are the attributes of God. It's a part of it. It's what it is. The apple has a weight, has a shape, has a taste, has a color. Red is not apple. Sweetness is not apple. These things altogether are apple. They are what apple is. They are what existence is. Existence is a prime matter, a prime will, and somebody who possesses all of this. And it's got to be like this because there has to be two agency to it. That's why Abdullah says, yes, you can see something goes going down, but that doesn't mean anything. Then Baha'u'llah says something more strange. He says in Persian book, Ma'ade Osmani, Ma'ade Osmani is the name of the book, volume 7, page 88. I translated this. Whoever opened his inner sight would observe in every atom a sun. Like it says, big suns are inside an atom. Then in that sun, there is another sun, and in the sun of the sun, another sun, inasmuch as there is no end to it. So here we see that, just as there's no time, there's also no beginning to say, okay, this was the beginning of the matter. Well, some say to me that this is poetic. It's impossible. There's no sun inside an atom. We just said that, and physics tells us that the entire universe was inside something that's 1 to the power of 26 minus 26, 0, is smaller than the nucleus of an atom. So that everything is in there. But in quantum mechanics, you have to know this. The universe, the matter that we have, is made out of bosons and leptons. Matter particle and energy particle. Bosons are energy particles. The matter particles, such as electron, cannot be piled on the top of each other. Doesn't matter what happens. Even if they turn into a black hole, they cannot become in a small piece, as they say. Right in the middle of the Milky Way galaxy. There is a Sagittarius, they call it, or something. They say there's 14 billion times bigger than the sun. Yes, yet it's a black hole. Black hole means the Earth can be crunched into a grain of salt. With that respect, still there's something in the middle of the galaxy that's 40 billion times bigger than the sun. Why? Because it's matter. Matter, whatever you crunch it to a one point, it cannot crunch anymore. In this chair, I only can sit. You can't put another person on the top of me. If you put him, then there's two of us, it can be seen. Both of us cannot occupy the same place. That's what it is. But that's not the case with the bosons, which is energy. Energy has no mass. You can shoot beam of light by millions of light. Beam, shoot it at one point on the wall. All these billions of light beam, they can land on one spot. The spot does not become bigger. It just becomes brighter and brighter and brighter. But not bigger, not in size, because energy has no mass. Therefore, this word of Baha'u'llah is correct. And it tells us that the beginning of the universe, the material universe, it could have not been a material as such, like it is in the black holes. It must have been an energy. Matter at that point becomes energy. After all, and the Big Bang Theory, the universe is in a stage of seriously hot. Hot. Beyond hot. And I extrapolated from this that if we look at the second law of thermodynamics, it says the matter, the entropy, which means disintegration, increases in time. If you leave something there, in time it will disintegrate. The structure will become destroyed in time. The heat does the same thing to the matter. If you heat it up, as it's in the middle of the sun, no matter can exist in the middle of the sun. It turns into hydrogen. Some helium on the top. You heat it more, it turns into plasma. There is no really atom structure. Electron is wandering around for itself. Proton is somewhere else. It's too hot. They can't come together. In such a heat as it is, you cannot even assume there was any particles. It must have just been that one. one energy. That is what you can interpret the word of Baha'u'llah this way. So, I also extrapolated from what Baha'u'llah says, since there's no beginning and no end. I have proposed, created, extrapolated that the universe of Baha'u'llah, since there's no beginning and no end, but it has beginning and it has end, but this beginning has no beginning and that end is not really an end. I extrapolated that the universe, the picture, should be a picture of circle and tubes. It starts from one point, Big Bang, and then goes to Big Crunch. Everything gets destroyed. It does not repeat itself again to become the same universe as before. It doesn't. That will be the David Hume's mechanical world. Like a clock. Got to 12 and then comes back 1. Universe is not like that. It's dialectic. When it recycles, something else, something new happens. So, so it starts from one point, Big Bang and a Big Crunch, then it continues, just like a spring. It's a circle, but it becomes another circle, like a slinky. You know, it's a big tube made out of circle that you put in the steps and just falls down by itself. At the just comes down on its own weight. So it turns like a slinky. The cycle, one cycle continues again, becomes a tube, and the tube turns around and becomes another new cycle, like a donut. A donut is a cycle, but made out of many cycles in a tube. But that continues, becomes again tubes, and the tubes ends, becomes cycle. Like this, it's no beginning and no end to it. That's the model of universe in the Baha'i faith. Let's say something about also the Baha'i faith believes that universe has a center. Abdullah says for anything in the world there is a center. Around the center they develop. But in 1905, when Albert Einstein, brought this special theory of relativity, Alexander Friedman and others from, the Russian guy, they told him there has to be a beginning to this, and this thing is also expanding. It will be expanding because it's just from the Big Bang, it just goes on and expands. Einstein said no, there's got to be a center where it stops the world to just go out of hand. He modified his theory, the theory of relativity, and put in that cosmological constant that based on that, it's a constant that stops it. Later on, the American lawyer that turned into astronomer, Mr. Hubble, he went on, became an astronomer and looks at the universe, he categorized a whole lot of galaxies. And he saw they're all showing in the spectrum of the visible color, it's showing red. Red means higher frequency. Blue means smaller frequency. Red means it's a bigger frequency. That means they're going far away. If you come close the light, it will turn into blue. Goes further away, it becomes far away, it's going far. He said, therefore, the world is expanding. So they proposed that the world is like a balloon. It just expands itself, There's no center, particular center. Baha'i faith does not believe that. Baha'i faith, based on the writing of Abdullah, said there is a center. I'm going to say this can be supported by the fact that the Big Bang Theory, which is the most successful, is not different from everyday stars in our universe that runs out of the fuel, and hydrogen turns into helium, and helium becomes bigger, finally becomes steel. At that point it just stops. But the whole weight comes into the center and it collapses into a nebula. And this supernova, that's where you get the neutron star, black holes. Really, really small, with a lot of power into it, a lot of gravity. So the big object, it seems when they're getting destroyed, the most of the weight goes into the center. Huge weight goes into the center. Huge. Most of the weight goes there. That's what black hole is. The whole thing doesn't turn into black hole. It just comes down and springs out. The material in the center becomes black hole. This is, in my opinion, is no different. Big Bang would have to be something like that. Just not the sun, but the entire universe was a huge, huge, massive. So it explodes. And the big, huge matter must have been stored in the center. And that, in my opinion, is the dark matter. Because they cannot calculate with all many stars and things that we have, there must be more matter. It's not enough. So, but this goes against the evidence that all these galaxies are showing infrared. They're going away. How does that support? I say this center are so far away from us, and the orbit of these galaxies are so ginormous. The life of many, many, many Earth requires for one time they revolve around it. For now, we're seeing that we're going far away. It doesn't mean at one point they don't come back, if we could last that long to see it. It's like Earth is here and Jupiter goes away, so well, it will show red. But if you wait, it comes back towards the Earth, then you see it as blue. This, in fact, is the truth. That in the local group of galaxies, like Andromeda, Magellanic Clouds, and others, that there is a blue ray coming. It seems some of these galaxies are returning, and they're revolving around the center. This is my firm opinion. That based on the word of Abdul-Baha, which is infinitely correct, and I've prove it to you, I'm the beginning of this story. I'll show you scientifically Baha'i faith is the only fact that exists among this big, clamors of this so-called knowledgeables. So that should count for the dark matter, in my opinion, in the center. And finally, I'm going to talk about time. What is time? I'm hearing this big scientist, physicist like Sean Carroll, another fantastic guy, and others. They're just, to me, their definition of time, an arrow of time, and time goes this and that. It's just diabolical. Time does not exist on its own. Time goes along with the motion. Time is a measurement tape. You can say from Guelph to Toronto is 1 hour, or you can say 60 minutes if you drive 100 km an hour. I can say to the sun, I don't know, so many million kilometers. Or you can say it's 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes if you go with the speed of light. So time means the distance of the matter as it goes around. Since every matter has a beginning and an end, It starts at one point and ends at one day. So for example, I can say, I'm living when I was born. At age 50, let's say, I see that I'm not developing and evolving and growing anymore. I would say I reached to the peak of my time. And the next year I see I'm getting weaker from the last year and gradually going down. So I can say arrow of time goes up and goes up. Arrow of time. It's the motion, the movement of the body as it grows is moving towards the peak and comes down. A circle. From the day I was born or from the day I'm going. I finish up cycles. I hope this was useful to you, but next time I'm going to be talking about the fact that nothingness, that metaphysics has got everything to do with us. But we cannot use even philosophy to understand it. We can use philosophy to explain it, but it cannot be realized and understood. There's a different kind of tools you need to do that. It's a human being. That's what Baha'u'llah's come for. It's like I'm talking how we are created to a 10 years old child. Anything I say, how, male goes into female, and even I show the picture right on the computer, explain everything. He's more and more confused and more baffled. He doesn't understand how this works. Because he's just not, his age is not there, he's not ripe. But it's 15 and 16, you don't have to tell him what sex is, he knows it by himself. To understand that nothing, it requires that. It could be a simple lady somewhere lost in a village in China that barely can speak words, but she knows it. Because there is a different requirement is there. And I will explain about that, hopefully next time, if I could be living. Thank you.